Okay, so here's just a rundown of my Take Courage session. Brought everything in and just chopped out a lot of places where there wasn't sound, chopped out where there's just heavy key noise, because compression's going to enhance all the quiet stuff in the way it shrinks dynamic range. So when there's not sound I want, I take it out. I took out more breaths for you than I did for Megan's voice. Lead vocal, you often want breaths as long as they're not in the way, because it just helps make it more normal and human sounding, especially in a video like this. You're gonna see a lot more moments on camera, so we don't want to obviously make them go away. I did nudge her voice just now. I didn't want to before because I was worried it had to link to picture somehow. So I didn't want to visibly, unsync audio from picture. But yeah, I agreed. It was definitely kind of behind. So I think I moved it forward by 20 milliseconds. I think 10 ms is um, my regular setting for nudge, and then it's just plus or minus in Pro Tools to do that. I went in and pitched this low E down in that first phrase because it was even too high. It actually changes. It actually sweeps on that note, but never got quite low enough. So I brought it down so that the auto tune would not want to undo what I was doing. So yeah, pitched it down manually without using a real-time plugin. And that's it for that. Let's look at effects first. I've got a plate reverb. So plate is going to be, or for vocals, I like it shorter and brighter. So I took a little top off because plates are really bright kind of by default. Pre-delay is the time before a reverb kicks in, like it holds back the dry signal before putting it through the reverb maker. So you want some pre-delay on vocal reverbs often because that adds clarity for the words the person is saying, because it puts a little gap in before there's reverb on any given syllable or phrase or anything. Um, so yeah, I just brought that into the ballpark. And then also I like coupling brighter, shorter reverb with a longer hall reverb. So this has big size on it, so there's going to be a lot of diffusion, very low pre-delay, lower than on the other. I probably could have brought this right down to 0. Big spread, huge diffusion, just like a really cloudy reverb. So this isn't going to be the same kind of bright ear candy. It's just going to like be lush and stretch out all the vocals. So I've got those two reverbs working together. Um, and eighth note delay on another bus that I only put on lead vocal. Um, yeah, a fair bit of the feedback, which is how many repeats come on it. Pulled down high cut a fair bit so that it's more tape sounding, more analog sounding. Saturation is kind of like distortion, but just when tape gets oversaturated, it just has this kind of natural squish to it, um, so that it's not an exact copy, but something darker and a little more compressed in a way. And then this kind of vocal doubler, an emulator of an old vocal doubler, um, that is only unmuted with automation on the big after bridge part of the song. So it's only on her voice and only after the bridge is over. And just, it's kind of like chorusing almost, but you just kind of hear a bit of her voice tucked in both speakers separately from the main voice. So those are the 4 effect buses. On each of you, I use auto tune in the key of G, set to the major scale, and really relaxed in its tracking, not very fast, and allowing lots of flexibility for like scoops and fall offs and stuff like that. So hopefully it's pretty transparent, but the downside of transparent is it's not doing that much. But yeah, it'll hopefully just help things lock in a bit. I've got an expander gate on both of you guys after that. That's kind of the next thing I'll put in after tuning. Because compressors shrink the dynamic range, you want to take the really quiet bits and turn them all the way off. So this will even catch between phrases and stuff and just kind of remove some of that room noise if it's set just right. And look ahead means that it's actually finding those quiet bits. So it's going to perform better than a live gate because a live gate just has to take the audio as it comes, but this can actually go ahead and find those quiet moments and make them more quiet. So that takes playing with the threshold of where it kicks in and the ratio of how severe it's going to be, how long it takes to shut off, how long the gate holds open when it does open to let vocal sound through, and then how quickly it opens too, which is usually pretty quick. Oh, it's actually way quicker on hers. If we go to hers, we're down to microseconds. So I definitely don't want to chop off the beginning of anything on her, but it's not audible on you either. Um, on yours, I do a multiband compressor yet that is I have the high mids bypassed. So really all it's doing is sucking out low mids. That's the main job. I've got it set to this is around middle C and like an octave and a half or so, or nearly 2 octaves below that. And that's just when you're singing low, it's going to pull out more because you're singing right on the notes that it's sensitive to. And then when you sing higher later in the song, it's not going to affect it as much. But I just like a low mid multi-band compressor band, especially on you. And then we use that live as well. Then I got a channel strip. In your case, where we got a boost at 3.5K for some presence, and this compressor is working pretty low ratio. And working really gently. This is showing how much the compressor is working while it's playing, and I'm just getting 3 to 6 dB. It's pretty light. So I like doing more than one compressor and using them gently. So this is integrated right into the channel strip. And this EQ I'm just using for a little shimmer, a little high boost. You can't choose where this band is. I just like the way it performs on vocals up high. So I've got that on you. And then I'm cutting out right around 1.5K, right where there's kind of like presence, nasally stuff that especially want to take out a little bit in a background vocal to kind of make it disappear a little bit more. And then a, a classic 1176 style compressor with fast attack, low ratio, fast release. And this is working pretty gently too. I'm just seeing 2 or 3 dB when you're singing. And I've just got the 2 reverbs on you. I've got send levels set for those. And then it's on her voice that I have the 2 reverbs and the delay and the doubler that comes in later. So her voice also has the auto tune and the expander and the same channel strip. I'm just EQing different things for her. I needed a huge cut right around A440. So this is right around like kind of an alto's fundamentals. This is where there's often a lot of like for guys, the you know, a bloated sounding voice is usually around 250 or 300. And for women, this is a common place where just that the main notes she's singing are really overwhelming. So big pull out there and a tiny little high end boost well above the S's at 12.5K. And the same light compression with a really fast attack and just staying gentle. Also tried to pull out right where those S's are with this EQ, just kind of separately. This can be more targeted and visual up high. Then the de-esser that's really heavy-handed, more than normal. A bigger range than I'd normally use, a lower threshold than I'd normally use. It does look ahead just like that gate, so when I'm playing, I can see. So it's showing what it's detecting and how much it's actually pulling down. And the reason I'm letting this be more heavy-handed than normal is because I've got the vitamin right after it that's going to want to push in some of those same areas. So I brought up a preset and then made some adjustments. I moved this high filter, so the high band is higher, around 8K. So this is going to be hopefully above the S's or right on the borderline. It slowly kind of approaches like full capacity right around here. So this is enhancing and adding that air up high and that texture up high, and then some high mid kind of presence too, keeping that right out of those mids that we're getting to be, too much in that octave above middle C. But this is kind of beyond there, so still, yeah, sparkle and texture, and this, vitamin is kind of an enhancer of those different zones. Turn the punch way down because I don't want like punch in the high end necessarily. I didn't want it to be um, more percussive. I didn't want more transients happening. So I made it smoother and let it do its width thing, which I don't think is going to do anything because there isn't much stereo information. But technically, this is trying to widen the stereo field of her voice. But even though her voice it came in as a stereo file, I don't think it's doing much that's stereo. And then I like this on lots of different voices. This is a Fairchild compressor emulator. The Fairchild is a tube compressor, and one of its kind of characteristics is kind of the harder you hit it, the harder its ratio is. Like there isn't a ratio adjustment on here. You don't get to pick. It just kind of does what it does. You just get to throw more sound at it and tell it when to kick in and do its thing. But you can really hear that if it's working lightly when the person's singing all the time, the more they dig in, the more severe the ratio of the compression is, and that's just kind of, I think, inherent to how the circuit works and how tubes, act when they get saturated and have more signal running through them or more electricity running through them. So yeah, I just like the way it behaves on her voice. I would normally have the mono version of this, but this is stereo because the file came in stereo, so you use a linked stereo compressor. And then on the piano, I have a big dip at 300. I just thought it was sounding too kind of bloated in that kind of um, lower end of mid-range or higher end of low mid-range, depending on how you look at it. But right around there, this is a pretty severe dip, and then a boost around 1K. And this is just an emulation of a really musical analog EQ called a Pultec EQ. And this is all about mid-range. So if I knew I was wanting to work on things that were really musical and yeah, added a yeah, it isn't a very clinical sounding EQ. It does its thing, but also just generally enhances the tone. And then I've got an LA2A style um, compressor or leveling amplifier, which again, really simple controls. How much sound do you throw through it and how much do you want it to reduce peaks? And I've got it set so that it's kind of working really lightly in most of the song, but then as you start to dig in more later on, it's working a little harder, not changing like the Fairchild, but just yeah, a signal when it gets stronger is going to it's going to get more compressed. And then I've got in parallel, or right in series as a plugin, I've got this concert hall reverb, but it's like 11% on compared to the dry sound coming through. So it's just kind of like a background reverb layer to kind of make it sound more lush. And then Pro Tools has what do they call this, clip gain on each region. Every region you edit out, you can quickly get a volume control over. So I can just like boost the early sections that are quieter and leave the later sections alone. Um, so it's still a very dynamic song, but this just gets us closer to a mix right off the top. I'm not doing any automation at all on this. I'm just taking the sections of the song and getting them, more towards the area where they seem mixed all along. And then I have overall bus compression. This is an emulation of a compressor that would be on the bus of an SSL G series console. And yeah, it's kind of barely moving the needle through most of the song, but it just helps glue the vocals and the piano together to seem as one. And then this is just a leveling meter that's keeping me in the zone of what you want to be at for videos and podcasts. This is like, so this is loudness units full scale is what LUFS stands for. And the goal for podcast is minus 16. Technically the goal for um, YouTube, I think, is supposed to be less, like minus 18. And you can put in a peak limiter that actually stops it from going over. But this is kind of like, this is like monitoring the nerdy numbers of the sound coming out to see how you're doing for mastering. And the only thing that's actually changing the sound would be this peak limiter if it got hit. But it's looking at short-term and long-term numbers as I'm playing to see that I'm in the right zone dynamically. So those are all the things that I have done on this song.